Welcome to the Healers Café, conversations on health and healing with Dr. Manon.
So welcome to the Healers Café, and today I have with me Kendra Dahlstrom, and her practice is Soul Star Awakening. So I'm going to ask you a few questions about that, but basically you help professional women who feel disconnected from their soul's purpose to shine their light brighter. So their lifestyle might be peaceful and empowering through divine connection. And I think that's the goal. And you use a bunch of different energy healing techniques like Reiki, like quantum touch, light therapy, coaching, spiritual intelligence, somatics, and intuitive guidance. So, well, I just want to welcome you. And let's start with Soul Star Awakening. So what does that mean, and why did you pick that name?
Well, it's actually a recent sort of rebranding for me, and it's largely because when I started to go through my own journey, I felt that I would have periods of time where I'd plateau. And then once I really started exploring what the soul star chakra represents and what it is, as I was doing my Reiki training and healing myself, I found that to me was sort of the gateway that flooded open, that allowed for my healing to just really accelerate. And I believe in part that it's because it's our connection to our inherent wisdom, which is the knowledge and wisdom we're born with, true connection to divine love, and how we're a reflection of that. And then last but not least, just our connection to our purpose and our higher self, and sort of that imprint that we're always striving to replicate here on earth. And so once I was able to really build a relationship with my higher self and really accept that I am of divine love, and explore what this relationship looks like and how I want to be more of divine love in my relationships with others and how I react to things here in my earthly presence, I just found that my own healing just accelerated threefold. And so I thought, if I'm going to niche, I want to focus there, because as I work with women every day in the corporate world, the one thing I hear over and over again is, I don't even know who my higher self is, and I'd like to. I don't even know how to stop and slow down and ask myself for my own wisdom. And I forget how to do that, or I need to do that more often. And then the third piece was around divine love, and just really living in that place of non-judgment and love and acceptance, which
Well,
I believe is the path to all healing. So
yeah. Now, so let's go back one step.
yeah.
What compelled you to go down this healing journey? Because people say, what do we need to heal? And so what did you find out at the start?
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
I
Well, I'm a big believer in all the tools, right? And sort of, I tried all the different tools to see what would work. Let me take a step back and say, so my journey started when I was about 13, and I started realizing that I was just drawn to self-help books, and I was reading the Four Agreements and some of the old books, and I found myself just diving into those. I now have since learned over the years of my journey in personal development, and then which led into leadership development and integrating into my corporate job and my workplace and executive coaching and now spiritual coaching and sort of all these things, that it was a natural part of my process to become more spiritually attuned and to become, I don't even really like the word enlightened so much, because I feel like it kind of casts a shadow of judgment, but for me to just become more spiritually attuned into who I am, who I want to be. And I've always been a very empathetic, intuitive person. So it was a natural path for me. I will say that over the last several years, as I've tried to work through my childhood traumas of cyclical cycles of narcissistic abuse, as well as sexual abuse, other trafficking trauma and whatnot, I didn't really know what those things were until the last few years. And as I started to become more aware as the pandemic came upon us about trafficking, my own awareness was opened to, wow, like the acceptance and acknowledgement that I had been trafficked in a variety of different ways throughout my life, into my 20s, and that I really needed to go deeper into my own healing. I felt like I'd already done so much work, but as we all know, it's kind of like an onion.
Yeah.
Once you think you've done the work, there's more. And I really just needed to commit to healing, because I realized that a lot of stuff was being brought up that was impacting my relationship with myself, my ability to love myself, my relationship with my husband and my kids. And I just truly believe that when we heal ourselves, we heal the world and the people around us.
So can you, explain a little bit? Like, I know from a clinical perspective, when I, have had patients come to realization that they've gone through horrific things, whether it's, sexual abuse, but trafficking, or even, ritual, what's that called?
Satanic ritual abuse.
Satanic ritual abuse. And, I know when I started my practice, I had no idea that such atrocities existed in this world. I thought I was listening to stories that were too unbelievable to be true. And so but I listened. I mean, that's part of, what I believe is important, because if there's safety to share, it's part of the healing process. But what I also kind of recognized is that people don't always know that this is what has happened to them. Like, there's such humongous mind control. And I don't know if you could sort of expand on that from your experience, because mine is more like secondhand through people telling me this.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right. There's a lot of gaslighting, right? And part of the whole mind control, whether it's monarch or, otherwise, is all about, trying to push down, the person that's been victimized to that they're crazy, or they're imagining this or whatever. And so that's a lot of what takes place. And so how I honestly came to recognize it was I was applying to be a volunteer for Operation Underground Railroad locally. I just felt really drawn to the cause, and now I kind of know why, but really like drawn, like I couldn't not do this. And so I went to go apply, and as part of their process, I think it's a really great protocol they have in place. They have you watch a video so that you can understand what trafficking is and identify it and explain it, because you're going to be part of this cause and mission. And so as I was watching the video, I had to stop it about 4 times because I thought I was going to vomit. And my whole body, I even get the chills talking about it, but my whole body started shaking. And I kept having this thought like, oh my gosh, I've been trafficked. And then, no, just keep watching. You're so imaginative, Kendra. And I knew that I had had a lot of series of molestation, like so many I probably can't count. And I know that I'd been raped several times, but I just honestly, it stinks to say it this way, but I honestly thought I just had bad luck or made some really bad decisions.
Right.
Like I honestly just sort of put it all on me. And while I totally, as a coach, of course, I believe in accountability and, taking ownership of things, at the same time, there's certain things that we can't, that we can't control, right? That happen to us. And so I really just lived my whole life. Like I'm 48 now, 49. Like I lived 45 years thinking like I just had like bad luck, and I just had to pull my bootstraps up and make the best of it. And then as I went through this video, I realized like, oh wow, trafficking really isn't as overt as it sometimes we think it is. Like we see it in movies and TV shows, and that's absolutely accurate, but there's different kinds of trafficking, and it's not always being locked in a cage and put in a truck and carried over state lines and then left there or unlocked. It can be as I say simple, but as covert as, you think you're, on a date with somebody, and after a few weeks they tape you, and you don't know about it, and then they sell that tape, or that your pictures are taking you with your clothes off, and then they're sold, and you don't know that that's, being done until after the fact. A lot of, just different types of scenarios. It could even be that you're put up at a party, and and you think you're just there at a party, and then you realize that somebody paid for you to be there, and then someone comes up to you and assumes that you're going to be going home with them, and so you have to work your way out of some of these situations. And I just thought it was like weirdos, or bad choices to go hang out with the wrong people. And then I started putting two and two together, and it makes it even more convoluted, because I will say that 85 to 90% of people that tend to end up in trafficking systems have been molested and abused, and tend to be victims of sexual harassment. And so it's just this snowball effect of where you start to think, okay, is it a product of my past, or is there something bigger going on here? And so it really opened my eyes to seeing my life through a whole new light. And when I started to look that maybe, just maybe, things were connected, and that maybe there was actually, not to be paranoid, but maybe a little bit more of a system in place that I'd gone in and out of over a few years. Actually, things in my life that made no sense suddenly made a lot of sense. And I could, I get the chills talking about it. I could feel it in my body. And as you say, the body doesn't lie. And so that's how I stumbled upon this. And then that's when I realized that I was dealing with a whole new level of evil, and things that I kind of could remember, but I always thought were weird, like recurring dreams and things, but I just kind of blew off, that I felt like there was a whole new element of things that I didn't even really remember, because of my own body's protection, that I needed to delve into to heal. And then that's when sort of the second layer came through, which was in my conversations with with God, who I talked to. It was that I didn't really need to remember everything to heal, that he would still provide that for me. And so that's when I really started studying different modalities, because I was determined to heal.
Yeah, I mean, it's a unbelievable journey, because it's like you're in part the victim, but with the gaslighting, you're responsible for this because it's your fault. It's one part of the element, but it's not really your fault, because you're in a greater system, literally, of mind control and organization. And it's just like psychologically, the steps to come to terms with this are sorry, to stop the dinging. Give me 1 second. I
No
put
problem.
do not disturb. Just a second here. I don't know how much more do not disturb I can not disturb,
Well, I will tell you, not to scare you, but from an energetic level, whenever I am talking about this, there always tends to be disruptions.
Interesting.
Disconnects. So
Yeah.
I'm not making you paranoid. It doesn't mean somebody's listening, but
Yeah.
I do think energetically, for me, it's always just confirmation that there are forces that don't want this talked about.
Yeah. Oh, I think, yeah, I would agree by just seeing a little bit as things are trying to come out,
Yeah.
how much censorship there is. And I think it's timely now, given the movie that's coming out in July. But what's the title of it again?
Sound of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom.
With Jim Caviezel. And I know they've been trying to get it out for a year, and I've been following that, and I'm preparing myself.
Yeah. And and the sad part too, I mean, so many people have fallen for the idea that, oh, this is all a conspiracy, and it's like the freedom movement, that basically people who want freedom on all levels usually want to take responsibility of things. And the children, and this extends to to women as well, and of course boys, they're all part of this, but we have to stand up for them, because they're too young. It's not about
Yeah.
responsibility or not responsibility. It's like, this is organized crime, and it's
Yeah.
traded by our, the people we trust, basically,
Yeah.
on some
Well, and
level.
that makes, if I'm a little emotional, it in a, that rings true for me, because I will tell you, and I'm hoping this speaks to someone in your audience, because every healer I know got into the work because they needed to do their own healing. So I think we can all say we're on this level playing field in terms of healing and what's needed, and just that if we heal ourselves, we can heal those around us. And a lot of us that are healers have seen and witnessed the magic of that, right, with our own friends and family. And I think as we all band together in this movement and just for each other, it's really powerful. And so I'm very moved by that. I will tell you a story in my life that I'm sure rings true to a lot in your audience, is that, it's very common in any kind of abuse. It doesn't have to be trafficking, or it doesn't have to be sexual abuse, just any kind of abuse, is that you're not seen and you're not heard.
Mhm.
And that has been my story. And I've just seen, even karmically, like how that just, for those of you that believe in past lives, I've gone back and, done some past life. And like, I have been a satanic ritual abuse survivor since Jesus's times. Like this has been going on for a long time. And so I believe this is the lifetime for me to cut that, to stop that. And there's no coincidence that it's this time when all this is coming out and everything's going on in our world. And so I just, want to share with your audience that the pattern of not being seen and heard is so common, and they use that against you, right? That's part of the gaslighting process. And so now is the time, hopefully my story, gives people courage to maybe start asking questions, and to not doubt themselves, and to trust their higher self and their wisdom, and that's why I'm so connected to that soul star chakra, is that's where I really started to lean into my truth and what I know is true and what my body knows is true. And, I'd like people to believe me, but if they don't, that's not my problem, and just to really lean into that, because I think there's a lot more of us out there than we think there are.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So how did you get to know your truth? Because gaslighting can
Mhm.
be unbelievably destabilizing, right? Because it's
Oh,
yeah, you could probably talk about it a lot more, but it's also that it really makes you doubt yourself.
What would your life be like if you were pain-free? If you were one of the millions who suffer from chronic pain, the thought of just one day without it may seem impossible. This is often because conventional medicine tends to fall short in the treatment of pain, opting to prescribe pills or recommend surgery rather than getting to the root cause of the problem. But if you are suffering with emotional or physical pain, there is hope. Join the founder and CEO of Bowen College, Manon Bolliger, live online for your body-mind reboot. Learn how to listen to your symptoms and get to the root cause of your pain. Plus, be trained in basic Bowen therapy moves so that you can reboot your body for optimal health. You don't have to live in pain. You can heal. Stop the pain pill cycle by visiting www.yourbodymindreboot.com to learn more and to register.
Like on a
yeah.
deep level, but it feels as if it's thoughts, right? It's still, you're in the domain of thoughts. And then if you latch on to their story about, oh, no, it's all in your head, which is usually kind of the statement, no, that didn't happen. You're projecting this, or you're whatever, if you attach meaning to the story they give you, then it'll affect you emotionally very deeply too, because it's none of this is yours, right? So it's like you have to kind of bypass this circuitry and know how to intuitively know the truth yourself, right? And so how do you do that, or how do you help your clients know their truth, like
Yeah,
get behind
such a
that
great
veil?
question. Well, it took years for me to figure it out. But for me, it was a feeling I get in my body when my knowing, I call it, right? Like I knew something and I could feel it in my body. And so for me, it was just an exercise of asking myself questions and knowing, is this true or not true? And feeling that in my body and getting, a sense of what that means. I think also a lot of journaling. I actually had been in touch with Kathy. Um, um, I'm blanking on her last name, but anyway, she is a PTSD survivor from the Reagan administration. And so I had been in touch with her because she wrote a book. And so she had recommended just writing things down. And then when you don't say anything out loud, just write it down and then go back and visit it every month. And if it still feels true in your body, then you know it's true. If it dissolves over time, then you know it's probably some sort of replace memory, which sometimes these 3-letter agencies can do, or a like a projection of memory, which because we can have vivid imagination, so you want to always keep that into account, but you also want to honor that this could be true. And so I played with that, and that really helped me. What I do now for my clients and what my app helps to do is really what I believe is just connecting to through grounding, and then also through connection through your higher self and your wisdom, is really tuning into what does it feel like to be connected to my wisdom. And the wisdom will never lie. So literally in a matter of 3 to 5 minutes, you can ask yourself a question and you will feel in your body if it's true. You won't know how it's true, details all the time, or why it's true, or or why you even think it's true. You will just know if it's true. And then what I've found through my practice, and I'd love to know if you found the same in yours, is that over time, as you're ready to accept that, the truth will come out, and you'll start to get more and more, whether it's images in your head or just words in your mouth or a knowing, you'll start to, the onion peels back and you'll start to learn more about that and why it's true. But in the beginning, you won't know all the details. And I think that's where we kind of go wrong, is we're creative and
Right.
curious beings. And so we want to know immediately, like, is this true? And I want to know all the details, and I want to see the timeline, and I want to see evidence and all that. And that may not all happen. First, it's sort of like the AA programs. Like, first you have to actually accept inside of yourself and your knowing that, oh, this is actually true. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it does. And I think, if you're under the age of 2, you may never actually find the proof, because your brain didn't know how to compute that anyways at the time, right? So, so you can't always have all of the evidence, but it's your system of evidence in your body, right? So I mean, there's different ways. What I've seen with with my patients is that if I could teach them to trust their body, that they could then reference their body and listen to their body, and the body would tell them yes or no. Because I found it harder to I mean, I relate to wisdom or to to your higher self. It actually means something to me, but it's not always something that people relate to, because it can be confused as a thought. Because sometimes you say you have a download of thoughts. Where did they download from?
You're absolutely right. The body will never lie. So that's a great
But the
place to
body
start.
just doesn't, so
Right.
so-
Like going back to my, when I was watching the video, I thought I was going to vomit a few times. That was my body's way of saying something is being stirred up here. And there's, and I, there's a truth here, right? Something's resonating on a very deep level for you. And you have the choice in that moment to decide if you want to look at why or not. And so I completely agree. I think the body's a great place to start. And, for me, I remember several 5-6 years ago, I was going through like a regression therapy. And so you're somewhat conscious, but you're kind of just out of it. And so he said, make a list of every trauma you remember. And so the list was really long. It was several pages. And I started remembering things I had even forgot about, right? And so he said, don't worry about if you think it's true. Let's just do this. And what was really interesting is as he went through each one in the healing process, I remember kind of being out of it, but I remember my body shaking. Like I literally had like an electric zing reaction to letting that energy go, right? And breaking those cords or breaking that energy. And so for me, I was like, oh, even little things that I didn't think were a big deal, I was like, okay, that was true, right? That's true for me. So
yeah, and I think that is also how you build this sense that you're what were the words what I related to was misunderstood, but you used two other words which were more
unseen and unheard.
unseen and unheard. Yes, that when you can see yourself, it also bridges that essential pain and discord of unseen and unheard, because now you know what's true within you, right? It's like your world becomes more complete because basically it's been squashed or discombobulated or whatever's happened to you. But once you can trust yourself, you also heal that trigger, right? Which is becomes a trigger later, right? You don't know why you have this, like why is it you always feel unseen? Well, it's been it's been repeated patterns, right?
Right. And then it gives you an opportunity to bring those soul fragments back together, which has been huge for me. And then now you start to, once you get to this process, you start to see how it's impacting your life. And like even in my job, sometimes, or when I was in corporate, like there'd be situations that would be coming up that were kind of like reminiscent of like old patterns. And what was interesting is instead of dealing with it the same way, I would deal with it in totally different way. So for instance, like one manager, I remember having this conversation where I kind of knew it was done. And instead of just doing like the safe thing, I said, with all due respect, I'm a healer and I don't know that you'll ever understand me and understand that. And I don't expect you to. It's completely okay for you not to. But my job is to help heal this organization. And that's the perspective I'm coming from. And he was just floored. Like he didn't even know what to say. And he's just like, oh, okay. Whereas in the past, I would have just sort of played along with this corporate game. So I only share that hopefully as inspiration for, people listening to this that are still trying to work through that and the power that can really come from the healing and then seeing yourself for who you are and then living those values is pretty astronomical.
Yeah. And I think too, it's, like you say, trauma usually is what brings healers into, it's the wounded healer, right? And then you kind of journey and then you come the other side and now you can help people. But I think it's really a call out to this whole conversation to people who maybe haven't identified themselves as potential healers. But if they start this journey and dare to speak and, share like this, there's such deep corruption, but we are many and our voices are needed, for those who cannot speak.
Absolutely. Well, and I believe we're all healers. I mean, whether or not somebody chooses to do it or not is, up to them. But I believe we're all healers, and that if you start to look at the human body and what we can do, and aside from sort of all these lies that have been told us for years and years, if we start to, look at how to live life a little differently and maybe not follow the food pyramid and maybe do some other things, you start to realize that like our bodies are pretty magical and Tesla was onto something. And I think that we are all capable of healing. And so I think, and I believe that, what we go through in life is something we sort of sign up for. And as awful as it may be, those can be turned into gifts to help others. And so just because, my experience is different than someone else out there, I want to encourage you that as different or benign as it may seem, it's not. There's people out there that need you with your unique experience to help heal them. And whether you do it as a profession or just a hobby, something that's service work on the side, whatever it may be, it's all needed. So.
Oh, for sure. So just what are the maybe one or two things that you found the most shocking in your discovery of, what you didn't realize? Like what sort of, like.
Well, so I'll start with one that's like more scientific. So it's the power of light. I've always loved sunlight. I've always known light. I've always felt more comfortable in light. I've always felt relaxed by it. And people are saying, "Oh, don't go in the sun," and all these things. Then I came across, sort of biotherapy. It's like basically biophoton therapy, and it's kind of like a red ultraviolet light, but it's actually a patented version of a different lights put together. This gentleman had basically put together after a trauma, and he realized, oh my gosh, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so this light has been very impactful on me and my health and my family. I use it on my dogs. I use it on my kids. I mean, literally within a day or two, it's like any sickness, anything just goes away, because what it does is it works at the quantum level in terms of going through biopharmaceuticals and taking that photon imprint of what's in the vial and taking it at a quantum energy level, just immediately into your body, into the blood vessels. And so this has had a lot of studies done on it. And so I found that was just like, not only just sunlight and the power of what's available to us naturally, but like the innovations that can be taken from, what God and nature have given us. And then also what people like Tesla have done to just, to really, really change our world and our health system completely. So those are the things that have been really, quite phenomenal. I think in terms of my learning about like, on a darker side about, trafficking, it's much more prevalent than any of us think. There's like, it's like 1 in 7 people have been trafficked. So whether you know it or not, 1 in 7 people you've come in contact with have been in some capacity. It's a dark web, and that, as a child, I didn't think much of it, but now when they say that, okay, a child can be sold several times a day and make continuous profit versus drugs just being used once and then it's gone. There's truth in that, and so we have to band together, because this is, not only just evil, but it's a spiritual battle. And I also just think that, there's often times, and I don't want to make this dramatic, Manon, but there's times where like, I often sat and wonder, like, how am I even still alive? Because, I had 1 or 2 times of thinking about suicide, and, luckily I didn't even get close. I just kind of thought about it seriously and like, had the bottle in my hand or something, but didn't, do anything. And, I dabbled in drug use for a little bit in my 20s, which was crazy because I was like this clean cut fitness person. And then it was like, I just didn't know how else to cope at that point in time. Luckily, completely, reverse that as I got into my 30s. But like, I've had people who've been telling me, they're like, it's a wonder you're not homeless or like walking the streets. Like, how is it that, you came here? And so not everyone's as lucky as me. Yet there's, I think, a lot of people like me out there too. So I guess, I don't know. I think my message is just that there's a lot more out there than I think we're aware of, and it's pretty dark and heavy. And so whatever we can each do to just help, the collective consciousness and just love each other, the better, and that doesn't, and when I say love, I don't mean always being nice, to a fault. I mean, it means clear is kindness, being honest is kindness, accountability and ownership's kindness. It doesn't mean, be a doormat.
No, exactly. I live in Canada, and kindness is kind of one of those things here which can lead to the doorknob or doormat.
Right.
Are you?
Right.
Sure, we'll do anything for you and take anything you say. You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, no, but no, that I think that's a very important message that you're leaving with us with. It's our time is up.
I know,
Actually,
so quick.
it's so quick. But I would love to do a follow-up with you maybe
Mhm.
after the film comes out, and when in the next, maybe 3-4 months, when I don't think there's any holding back what has
Yeah.
been hidden. And it would be very interesting to see how, just on the personal level, what it's like to go through, but also it's definitely stops the unseen in a big way.
Yeah.
When people are have to confront this reality, because it's of us one way or another. This
Mhm.
we have allowed it into our spheres somehow, even unconsciously. So it's to be able to heal that at the deepest level, so that this might be the end of it for humankind, would be a very exciting thought.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I would love to talk with you again. Thanks for having me. And again, I think that's the whole purpose of me launching my app, was just, this is the way that I felt like I could contribute. I have been doing sort of, deep one-on-one coaching for so long. I thought I need to do something that I don't even really care if I make money. I just need to get to the masses, but it needs to, not that anything's wrong with Calm or Balance or any of those other apps out there. I don't want this to be taken that way. It needs to be something a little more unique and different. And so I
So
think,
what is the app exactly? Because we didn't talk about.
so really quick. So it's basically, it's deep healing. So it's visuals, but it's deep healing through healing frequencies. And then as I'm recording and doing those frequencies, I actually do Reiki. So I do distance Reiki, and I basically infuse it the into the different healings that I've done for detox. There's like a cellular detox and regeneration. There's relaxation. There's higher self and awakening or meeting your higher self. So I sort of have different ones targeted at different things. It's just launching. So every month I'm going to be adding new content, and there's free content. And then there's also, a paid subscription for people who want to take it to the next level.
Right.
and be part of like a weekly Q&A with me,
Okay.
or get like personalized healings, or do those kinds of things. But it's really just all centered around deep healings. And there's some of that's done through meditation. Some of it's done just through sound with the Reiki energy behind it. I'm also exploring and playing with, like, if I add the biophoton into it, it works better direct. But there has been some success doing it over Zoom. So I'm kind of playing with, like, okay, if I infuse it actually into the visual as the person's, like, is there anything that is coming out on the other side? So we're still kind of playing with that. But, the purpose around it is really focusing on divine love, higher self, and innate inner wisdom. And just how do we dial in those 3 areas? And it doesn't mean we don't care about the other chakras. It just means, like, those, sort of are where we're focusing. And I think with my background in trauma and whatnot, I've at least been told from my clients that I'm able to hold a pretty deep space for that. And because of my background in remote viewing and just my abilities from a, I guess, an intuitive standpoint, that's something that's kind of offered to people who want to do more of like the in-person, group Zoom community side of it. Is I do sort of get messages, and so I just share them as appropriate. So I feel like that's a huge component to healing, because a lot of times there's things we need to hear from others on the other side, or even confirmation of things that have happened in our lives that sometimes I'll see that we didn't even know we needed confirmation, but just getting that confirmation can be really healing.
Great. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us at the Healers Café with Dr. Manon.